Hello, I'm Jessie, and welcome back to the Happiness Hippie podcast. Today we are getting into something that sounds gentle on the surface, but is actually quite demanding when you sit with it. The piece is about spiritual fitness, and what I like immediately is that it strips away the soft, almost decorative version of spirituality that many of us have become used to. Instead of escape or comfort, it frames growth as something closer to training, something that requires effort, consistency, and a willingness to stay present when you would rather look away. I'm here with the Happiness Hippie who wrote the essay, and I want to unpack what it really means to build inner strength in a way that actually holds up in real life.
Hello, Jessie. As always, it's great to be here. I think that contrast you pointed out is where the conversation has to begin, because most people are introduced to spirituality as relief, a break from pressure, a place to step away from difficulty. And there is value in that. Rest matters, reflection matters. But if that is where it ends, it becomes incomplete. Spiritual fitness is not about stepping out of life. It is about becoming more capable of meeting life as it is. And that requires effort in the same way physical strength requires effort. You do not build resilience by avoiding resistance. You build it by engaging with it in a deliberate way.
That comparison to physical fitness is useful because it immediately removes the idea that this is something vague or mystical. It becomes practical. If you want to be physically strong, you train. If you want to be mentally clear, you practice. And if you want to be steady internally, you also train. But I think people hesitate at that point because the word discipline enters the conversation, and discipline is not what most people associate with spirituality.
That hesitation is understandable. Discipline sounds rigid. It sounds like pressure. But here it is more about consistency than intensity. Spiritual fitness shows up in how you respond when things do not go your way, when someone challenges you, when you feel anxious or frustrated, when you are tired or overwhelmed. Those are the moments that reveal the condition of your inner life. If your stability depends entirely on things going well, then your foundation is weak. If you can remain steady even when things shift, then something stronger has been built. That strength doesn't come from a single insight. It comes from repeated practice.
The essay defines spiritual fitness in a way that keeps it grounded. It is not tied to religion. It's not about belief systems. It's about the condition of your inner life and how you handle what comes your way. And I think that's an important distinction, because otherwise people either overcomplicate it or dismiss it.
Yes, and once you see it that way, it becomes measurable in everyday terms. You can look at how you react under pressure, whether you pause or react impulsively, whether you stay aligned with your values or drift into convenience, whether you recover from difficulty or carry it for days. Those are all indicators, not in a judgmental sense, but in an observational sense. They show you where you are strong and where you need to develop.
The 4 components you outline also make it easier to understand: self-awareness, emotional resilience, values, and connection. That covers a lot of ground without becoming abstract. But again, none of those develop automatically, and that's where the conversation becomes uncomfortable, because people often want the outcome without the process.
That is the pattern. People want peace without facing what disturbs them. They want clarity without sitting in confusion. They want stability without practicing discipline. But growth does not work that way. It develops through resistance. Not extreme resistance, but enough to stretch you. Take something as simple as meditation. Many people try it once or twice and conclude that it does not work because the mind keeps wandering. But that wandering is part of the training. The act of noticing and returning is the exercise. Over time, that ability transfers into daily life. You become less reactive because you have practiced noticing before acting.
That reframes frustration completely. Instead of seeing it as failure, you see it as part of the process. And the same applies to what you call shadow work, which I think deserves a bit more explanation because it is often misunderstood.
It is misunderstood because people assume it is something heavy or clinical. In simple terms, it is the willingness to look at parts of yourself that you would rather ignore. Anger, envy, insecurity, resentment. These are not pleasant, but they are part of being human. When they are ignored, they do not disappear. They operate in the background and influence behavior in ways you do not fully see. Naming them changes that. When you acknowledge that you are angry or envious, you bring it into awareness. That does not solve it immediately, but it reduces the need to hide from it. Over time, that honesty leads to integration rather than suppression.
And that ties into something else you emphasize, which is consistency over epiphany. People often look for a moment that changes everything, a breakthrough, a realization, a turning point. But you're saying that most of the real change happens in small, repeated actions.
Yes, and that can feel underwhelming, which is why people overlook it. A gratitude practice is a good example. Writing down a few things each day may seem insignificant, but over time it shifts attention. You start noticing what is present rather than what is missing. That changes your baseline. The same applies to how you speak, how you respond, how you choose. Small adjustments repeated consistently create larger shifts. It is not dramatic, but it is reliable.
The framework you lay out makes this even more practical. Mindfulness, values, compassion, and reflection. Each one is something a person can actually do. Let's go through them, because I think this is where people need clarity, not just theory.
Starting with mindfulness, the aim is to train attention. That can be done through meditation, breath work, or simply paying attention while walking. The purpose is not to empty the mind, it is to become aware of what is happening internally before you react. Even a few minutes a day can create a noticeable shift over time. Gratitude comes next, and this is often overlooked. If you don't know what matters to you, your decisions become reactive. Defining your values gives you a reference point. Then the question becomes whether your actions align with them. Compassion and connection prevent the practice from becoming self-absorbed. If everything turns inward, it becomes narrow. Engaging with others, listening properly, and offering something of yourself expands your perspective. And reflection ties it all together. Without reflection, experience remains scattered. Writing, walking, or even speaking things out helps you process and integrate what you're learning.
What stands out is that none of this is extreme. There's no requirement for long retreats or radical lifestyle changes. It's all embedded in daily life. But there are also pitfalls, and I think it's useful to address those because people often fall into them without realizing them.
One of the most common is using spiritual language to avoid reality. Talking about positivity while ignoring anger or grief. That creates fragmentation. Another is waiting for dramatic experiences. People think growth will announce itself in a noticeable way, and they miss the subtle changes that are actually happening. Comparison is another trap. Looking at how others practice or present themselves and measuring your own progress against that pulls you away from your own experience. The correction in all cases is the same. Stay grounded in what is real for you. Pay attention to your own process rather than performing someone else's version of it.
There is also a practical section on how to begin, which I think removes a lot of hesitation. Choose one practice, keep it simple, stay consistent, and observe what happens. It is not complicated, but it requires commitment.
Yes, and the emphasis is on starting small. One practice done regularly is far more effective than trying to do everything at once. And patience is part of it. Progress does not appear immediately. But over time, you notice changes. You pause before reacting, you recover more quickly from stress, you feel less overwhelmed by situations that used to unsettle you. Those are signs of strength developing.
I think that is where the conversation connects back to happiness, not as something you chase, but as something that becomes possible when the internal environment is more stable.
That is exactly it, Jesse. Happiness in this context is not a constant state of feeling good. It's the result of living in a way that is aligned, steady, and honest. When you're not constantly correcting yourself, reacting impulsively, or avoiding what is difficult, there's more space. And in that space, a quieter form of contentment appears.
There is a line at the end that brings everything back to something very simple. The best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best day is today. It removes the excuse of timing. It brings the focus back to the present.
Yes, because the work always begins where you are, not where you wish you were. Spiritual fitness is not about reaching a final state. It's about continuing to build strength through practice, returning to awareness, to values, to presence again and again.
That feels like a good place to close. If today's conversation resonated and you want more perspective on building emotional clarity or relationships that are grounded and real, begin at the Our Approach page at happinesshippie.com. And please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for being part of this community. We'll talk again soon.